Brandon had only stepped in to grab toothpaste. That's all it was supposed to be. A quiet Tuesday evening just after 8, the aisles half empty, fluorescent lights humming that low, soulless tone that makes everything feel a little too exposed. He didn't see the woman right away, not until the argument had already started. She stood near the pharmacy counter, tall, unbothered, expensive-looking even in plain clothes. But 2 officers had boxed her in like she was a suspect in something, far darker than shoplifting. And then came the question, the one no one had dared ask before. Brandon didn't even register who said it. Maybe it came from the intercom, maybe from inside his own mind. But it silenced the entire store like a veil had been dropped over reality. Why are they pretending not to know who she is? The cop's demeanor shifted instantly, but not in the way you'd expect. Not embarrassed, not uncertain. They looked scared, like children caught playing with something they didn't understand. And the woman, she didn't speak. She just smiled, almost kindly, like she pitied them. Then something happened that Brandon would replay in his head every night after that, unable to explain. One of the officers leaned in, too close like he was trying to hear her breathe, and she whispered something so softly, so intimately, it looked like a confession meant for only one soul. The officer froze. His mouth opened slightly. And then, in the span of a blink, he collapsed, not like someone shot or injured. He folded, like he was being taken offline. The second cop just stared at her, his eyes wide and damp, but made no move to help his partner. Brandon backed away slowly, bumping into a stack of sale items, a display of cereal boxes that came crashing down, shattering the silence. That's when she turned. Her eyes met his, and Brandon felt a sharp, cold jolt right behind his heart, like a memory was being unlocked that didn't belong to him. She didn't chase him. She didn't need to. Somehow he knew that whatever she'd whispered to that officer was meant for him next. The news never ran the story. Security footage was corrupted. The store reopened like nothing ever happened. But Brandon couldn't let it go. He dug. Found old court records sealed without reason. Found photos from nearly 2 decades ago that looked exactly like her, unchanged. Found a child's missing persons flyer from 1998, with the same eyes. And then came the voicemail. No caller ID. Just a voice that sounded exactly like his mother, who died in 2011, saying a single line before cutting out. Brandon, don't let her speak your name. But it was already too late. She had. And the next morning, someone else was gone. The next morning, Brandon woke to silence that didn't feel like silence. It felt arranged, curated, like someone had placed each absence of sound exactly where it needed to be to make him notice what wasn't there. The ceiling fan had stopped working, though he was sure he left it running. His phone was dead, unusual because it was plugged in all night. Even his dog Jasper, usually pacing and whining for food by sunrise, was nowhere to be seen. Only, the voicemail remained. It hadn't vanished. It hadn't been overwritten or glitched into static like everything else in his life lately. The timestamp read 3:33 am, which felt too precise to be an accident. Brandon, don't let her speak your name. His mother's voice, or someone using it. He replayed it again and again, each time noticing new things. A hiss in the background, like a tape degrading. A distant thump that sounded like a heartbeat. No, more like a knock. And then, on the 6th replay, just as her voice broke into static, he heard something else right before the call dropped. A man crying. Not loud but raw, like he'd been at it for hours. The kind of crying you only hear in locked bathrooms, or hospital hallways at night. Brandon sat still on the edge of his bed for what could have been minutes or hours. The air felt wrong in his lungs, heavier than before, like it was carrying other things with it. Memories that didn't belong, thoughts that weren't his, like someone had rearranged the furniture in his mind while he slept. There was a name floating on the edge of his tongue. Not hers, not the woman at the store, but someone else. A woman in a red sweater he kept seeing in flashes, like flickers of a dream he couldn't place. She was always facing away. She was always humming. and the tune felt like a threat. Later, he'd try to talk himself out of it. Call it stress, hallucination, maybe even some kind of psychological break triggered by everything. But when he opened his Photos app and found dozens, hundreds of pictures he didn't remember taking, all from inside his house, many taken while he slept, that excuse shattered. There were timestamps on every one, no metadata, no reflection, of a photographer in mirrors, and in several of them, off in the far corner of his living room, was a silhouette, unmoving, watching, her shape always slightly different. Her face never visible, but in one, just one, Brandon noticed a detail that nearly made him vomit. The outline of her fingers was wrong. Too many joints, too long, almost wrapped around the frame like she knew he'd find it. Brandon stopped leaving the house. He turned off every device, every light, even nailed towels over his windows. Sleep became slippery, unreliable. When he did drift off, it was always to the sound of his name being whispered from the hallway. Never loud, never angry, just curious, like someone testing out how it felt in their mouth. And that's when Jamie showed up. He hadn't seen her in 12 years, not since college. She texted first, out of nowhere. You ever feel like you're remembering something? Wrong, because someone wants you to? That was all she sent. No greeting, no context. But Brandon didn't hesitate. He invited her over. When she arrived, he almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was different, shorter, darker, but it was her eyes that gave him pause. They looked tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep. They looked witnessed, as if she'd seen something that broke her sense of time. Brandon, she said as she stepped in, glancing around like the walls might lean in to listen. Tell me what's real, just start from the beginning, please. He tried. He told her everything, about the woman in the store, the cop collapsing, the voicemail from his dead mother, the missing dog, the pictures, the whispered name in the dark. He expected Jamie to laugh, to talk him down, to call a therapist, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "You're the third person I've known who's described the exact same thing." He blinked. Same woman? Jamie shook her head. Not exactly. Different face, different situation, but same pattern. Public humiliation, unexplainable fear, someone speaking your name without asking permission, and always, something vanishing afterward. Brandon wanted to believe her. But there was something off. The way she didn't blink enough. The way she kept scratching the same spot on her left wrist over and over, until the skin broke. The way she avoided looking into the mirrors in his house. That night, she stayed on the couch. Brandon didn't sleep. Around 2:14 a.m. he heard her speaking in low tones in the living room. He thought she was on the phone, until he heard her say his name. Not just once, but again. And again. Softly, like a spell being rehearsed. He crept out quietly, keeping to the shadows. She was sitting perfectly upright on the couch, eyes closed, mouth moving with that same soft rhythm. He pulled out his phone and recorded her, only a few seconds, but when he played the video back, the couch was empty. No sound, no movement, no Jamie, but she was still there. He could see her, breathing, whispering, staring straight ahead like she was somewhere else. And then, her eyes snapped open and met his. She smiled. "Brandon," she whispered, voice not her own. "I told you not to let her speak your name. But I never said I couldn't." Something inside him cracked. Not pain, not fear, something worse. Recognition. A memory he didn't know was missing came rushing back. Jamie, 13 years ago, the red sweater, her standing in his dorm room doorway, humming that same tune. He'd forgotten. He was the one who vanished next. But how could that be? He stumbled back, breath catching. Jamie rose slowly, her movements wrong, too fluid, like something wearing a skin that didn't quite fit. "Do you remember what you did?" she asked, stepping toward him. Why you stopped remembering? He couldn't speak. Of course you don't, she said. They made sure of that. Then she turned her head just slightly toward the hallway, and from the darkness the hum began again. Same tune, same cadence. Only this time, it was coming from his childhood bedroom, which hadn't existed for over 20 years. And as Brandon took one trembling step backward, phone still in hand, he watched in real time as the hallway began to stretch. Literally grow longer, inch by inch, like some invisible camera was zooming in. Doors appeared on either side, doors he hadn't seen since he was a boy. One red, one blue, one locked. He looked down at his phone again. The video was still playing, and this time, in the reflection of the black screen, he saw the third person, standing behind him. Smiling, their mouth was already moving, and just before the screen went black, just before the electricity cut out and the air turned to ice, Brandon heard the one thing he wasn't supposed to. His name, said twice. Once, by his mother, once by himself. That was the moment the tape ended. But the story didn't, because the next day, Brandon's apartment was found empty, except for the dog. Alive, untouched. Sitting by the door, and on the wall, written in ash, were 7 words. Ditue. Not answer if they remember you. Brandon wasn't sure how long it had been since the night Jamie disappeared again, or if she ever really came back. Time had begun to warp in the small apartment. Days folded into themselves like paper creased. In the wrong direction. Outside, the world carried on. Mail still arrived. Cars passed beneath his window. People smiled in the distance, their gestures half-formed and distant, like actors caught mid-line. But inside, he felt it. Not just the silence, not just the lingering cold in the hallway that never warmed up no matter how high he turned the heat, but something else. A pressure. Constant watching, waiting. He became obsessed with old tapes, VHS, cassette, analog relics he scavenged from thrift stores and online estate sales. Something about the grain, the texture of degraded film seemed to hold truths digital media couldn't hide fast enough. He would spend hours combing through flickering home movies and unlabeled reels from strangers, hoping to find a frame, a sound, anything that might match what he saw that night. Anything that might confirm that the shape in the corner of the frame wasn't a hallucination, but recorded proof of something real, something buried, something he hadn't imagined. It was in one of those tapes, a box of mismatched home recordings, marked only with the word memory, that he found the image that convinced him he was close. It was a birthday party, 1995. A backyard in Oregon, judging by the license plate caught briefly in the background. Children ran across the frame, laughing. A clown in an off-white costume juggled unevenly near a picnic table. And then, less than a second of footage, a girl in a red sweater turns toward the camera. Her face is obscured by motion blur, but her eyes. Brandon felt like he knew them. Not from this life, maybe not even from a life that belonged to him, but he recognized the fear, the knowledge. And behind her, just barely framed in the edge of the shot, was a door. Wrong, out of place, too tall for the house, painted black. No knob, just slightly open. Brandon paused the frame and stared. It wasn't just the door, it was the wallpaper. It was the furniture. It was the exact same living room from his childhood home, only from the wrong year. His family didn't move into that house until 1999, but this tape was from 4 years earlier, and it was already his house, already marked, already waiting. That night, he dug through old belongings in the storage closet, pulling out dusty photo albums, yearbooks, old class pictures from middle school. He remembered a boy, Adam, who disappeared in the 7th grade. The story was that he moved, but no one ever saw the family pack. No goodbyes, no forwarding address. It was as if someone turned the page and forgot to include him in the next chapter. Brandon flipped through the yearbook. Page 43, 7th grade, Class C. There were 25 students, but the class photo only showed 24. He stared at the empty space where Adam should have been. A blurred space, a smudge. Not just printed wrong, but like the ink itself was trying to forget. And then, written faintly in pencil beneath the image, not part of the print, but added later by hand, was a name. Jamie H. His skin crawled. Not because Jamie had gone to the same school, he didn't remember her ever being there, but because the handwriting was his. He turned to his journal, the one he'd started keeping after the first incident in the store. Every page was filled, scrawled in his hurried, looping script, except the last 5 pages, which were burned. Not torn, not blackened by accident. Singed from the inside. Auturiua, and like something scorched the ink itself from the fibers. But the smell was still there. Ash and citrus. He needed answers. Real ones. So he called her again, Jamie, or whoever she was now. But the number was disconnected. No record of it ever existing. And when he tried to email her, the draft wouldn't send. The cursor would freeze. The words would delete themselves. Sometimes the screen would just go black. Sometimes it would display a mirror image of his face, his actual reflection, like a webcam, but blinking at the wrong time. Then the package came, no return address, no stamps, just a manila envelope with his name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a single sheet of yellowing paper and a flash drive. The paper was a death certificate for a Brandon Hale, age 33, cause unknown. Date, last Thursday. He stared at it, trembling. It wasn't a mistake. The name, the birth date, the address. It was him. He plugged in the flash drive. There was only one file. Exposure.move. He almost didn't watch it. Something primal in him recoiled from even touching the play button. But curiosity, or whatever was left of the man he used to be, won out. The footage opened with static, then flickered to life. It was his living room. From last night. The camera faced the couch. He saw himself sitting there, eyes sunken, skin pale, staring at the wall. For nearly 3 minutes he didn't move, just breathed. Then, behind him, the wall began to ripple, like water, and from the distortion stepped a figure, not the woman. From the store, not Jamie, but something in between. Tall, feminine, familiar. She knelt behind him, placed one hand on his shoulder, and whispered something into his ear. Brandon hit pause, rewound, played it again. There was no sound. But the moment her mouth moved, his body reacted. In the video, his hands clenched, his head tilted back, his eyes rolled. And then the timestamp froze. Not at a time, at a date. March 18th, 1994. He had been 5 years old. His hands shook. His thoughts scattered. There was no way that footage was from last night, and yet everything in the image matched his apartment exactly. Except for one detail. The wallpaper. It was the same as his childhood bedroom. And in that moment, everything shifted. What if he hadn't found a tape of someone else's memory? What if someone had found his? What if what he remembered, what he thought was real, was nothing more than an overwritten file? A memory glitch deliberately planted to protect him from the hidden truth, that he had seen her before, that he was never supposed to remember. Brandon began digging into childhood photos, reaching out to old neighbors, former classmates, anyone who might confirm his memories. But most didn't answer. A few who did said something strange. Brandon Hale. You sure you're not thinking of Brian? Hale? That family didn't have a kid named Brandon. He checked the census records. There was no Brandon Hale at his childhood address in 1994, just Brian, a twin who didn't survive the winter. But Brandon had no twin. He remembered being an only child. He remembered his mother's face when she hugged him after school. He remembered crying in her arms when the nightmares got too loud. He remembered... No, that wasn't his memory. It was someone else's, or maybe they just made him believe that. That night, he went to the attic of his parents' old house, now abandoned, sold to developers but still vacant. He broke in, climbed the splintered stairs, and there, beneath a rotting tarp, found something he hadn't seen since childhood. A red sweater. Folded perfectly, untouched by time, still warm, and beneath it, a Polaroid, stuck to the floorboards with age. In the photo, 2 boys. Identical. One smiling, the other with his mouth open in mid-scream. Behind them, the woman, no face, just a blur. And written in a child's hand on the back, "Only one of us leaves, don't listen if she calls you back." Brandon dropped the picture, backed away. He needed air, he needed answers. But as he turned to go, he heard it, a voice from the hallway, warm and soft, his mother's voice. "Brandon, honey, come down, it's time to go. Brian's waiting." His feet froze. He was alone in the house. He had been alone for over a decade, and then he saw it, faint but unmistakable. A reflection in the attic window behind him. 2 shadows standing side by side, smiling. One was him, the other wasn't. That was when it clicked. The story was never about the woman. It was never about the cops, or Jamie, or the footage. It was about who survived, and who was still waiting for their turn. Because the lie wasn't that Brandon had forgotten. The lie was that he was ever the one who lived. Brandon had always believed he was alone in his unraveling. The hallucinations, the shifting memories, the cryptic messages, he thought they were his burden alone. But as the days passed, he began to notice patterns that suggested otherwise. Strangers on the street would glance at him with a flicker of recognition, only to avert their eyes. Emails from unknown senders contained phrases he had seen in his dreams. And then there were the symbols, etched into walls, scrawled on napkins, appearing in the margins of books he had never read. They were the same symbols he saw in his visions, a circle within a triangle, a spiral intersected by a line, a series of dots forming a constellation he couldn't name. He began to realize that he was part of something larger, something that had been silently watching and guiding him. One night, as he drifted into sleep, he found himself in a shared dream. He stood in a vast, empty room, its walls covered in the same symbols. Others were there, people he had never met yet felt an inexplicable connection to. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing fragments of memories and experiences that mirrored his own. They spoke of the observer, a presence that had been with them since childhood, guiding and manipulating their lives. They spoke of the glitch, a moment when reality would falter, revealing the truth hidden beneath. Brandon realized that his experiences were not unique. They were part of a collective awakening. As he delved deeper into this network of shared experiences, he discovered a hidden forum, a digital meeting place for those affected. They shared stories, dreams, and symbols, piecing together a puzzle that spanned generations. They spoke of the found footage, videos that revealed moments from their lives they couldn't remember, yet felt intimately connected to. They spoke of the memory glitch, a phenomenon where memories would shift, revealing alternate versions of events. Brandon began to question the nature of his identity, his memories, and the reality he had always known. One user, known only as the Witness, claimed to have seen the truth. They spoke of a force that had been manipulating humanity for centuries, using symbols and dreams to control and guide. They warned of the impending unveiling, a moment when the illusion would shatter and the truth would be revealed. Brandon felt a growing sense of dread, but also a strange comfort in knowing he was not alone. He was part of something larger, a collective journey toward understanding. As the days passed, Brandon began to see the symbols more frequently. They appeared in his dreams, in the world around him, and even in his own thoughts. He realized that they were not just symbols but keys, tools to unlock the hidden truths of reality. He began to experiment, drawing the symbols, meditating on them, and exploring their meanings. Each revelation brought him closer to the truth but also deeper into the mystery. One night, he received a message from the Witness. It contained a single phrase, "You were right all along. accompanied by a video file labeled unveiling.mp4. He hesitated, then opened it. The video showed footage from his childhood, a birthday party he didn't remember, a family gathering with faces he couldn't recognize. But in the background, always present, was the observer, a figure shrouded in shadows, watching silently. Brandon felt a chill run down his spine. The truth was more terrifying than he had imagined. He realized that his life had been orchestrated, his memories manipulated, his choices guided. The observer had been with him all along, shaping his reality. He wasn't just part of a conspiracy. He was the product of it. His identity, his memories, his very existence were constructs designed for a purpose he couldn't yet comprehend. As he grappled with this revelation, he felt the fabric of his reality begin to unravel. The symbols, the dreams, the shared experiences, they were all part of a larger design. And now the truth was emerging. Brandon knew that he couldn't turn back. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with dread and mystery. But he also knew that he wasn't alone. Others were waking up, seeing the truth, and joining the journey. Together, they would uncover the hidden truths, confront the observer, and reclaim their identities. The unveiling had begun. Brandon stood at the edge of the old pier, the wooden planks beneath his feet groaning with age and the weight of countless untold stories. The lake before him was a mirror, reflecting the overcast sky, a tapestry of grays that seemed to stretch into infinity. He clutched a worn journal in his hands, its pages filled with cryptic symbols, fragmented memories, and questions that had haunted him for as long as he could remember. The wind whispered secrets through the reeds, and for a moment, he felt as if the world held its breath, waiting for him to make a choice. He opened the journal to a page marked with a symbol he had seen repeatedly, a circle within a triangle intersected by a spiral. It was the same symbol that had appeared in his dreams, in the margins of books and etched into the walls of places he had never visited. He traced it with his finger, the ink smudging slightly, as if the symbol resisted being understood. The pages that followed were filled with entries in his handwriting, yet he had no recollection of writing them. They spoke of events he couldn't remember, people he had never met, and feelings that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. As he read, a sense of unease settled over him. The entries described a life that mirrored his own, yet diverged in subtle, unsettling ways. In one, he recounted a conversation with his mother, who had died when he was a child. In another, he detailed a journey to a city that didn't exist on any map. The most disturbing entry described a moment where he stood at the edge of a pier, journal in hand, contemplating the nature of reality. It was a perfect reflection of his current situation, down to the weather and the thoughts racing through his mind. Brandon's grip tightened on the journal as he felt a presence behind him. He turned slowly, half expecting to see the observer, the shadowy figure that had haunted his dreams in the periphery of his vision. Instead, he saw a woman standing a few feet away, her expression a mix of curiosity and recognition. She held a journal identical to his, the symbol on its cover, glowing faintly. "I've been looking for you," she said softly. "We all have." He stared at her, words failing him. She stepped closer, extending her hand. "My name is Elise. I've read your entries. They're the same as mine, and yet different." Brandon hesitated before taking her hand. Her touch was warm, grounding. "What is this?" he asked. "Why do our journals mirror each other?" Elise looked out over the lake, her eyes distant. "I don't have all the answers, but I believe we're part of something larger. A collective consciousness, perhaps. Our memories, our experiences, they're interconnected in ways we can't fully comprehend." Brandon felt a surge of emotion, relief, fear, hope. He wasn't alone in his confusion, his search for meaning. But with that realization came a deeper question. If their realities were intertwined, what did that say about the nature of their existence? Were they individuals or fragments of a greater whole? He opened his journal to the last entry, one he hadn't noticed before. It was dated for the following day and read, At the edge of understanding, you will find the truth. But beware. Some truths are not meant to be known. Brandon closed the journal, his mind racing. He looked at Elise, who nodded solemnly. "The choice is yours," she said. "To seek the truth, or to live in the comfort of ignorance." He turned back to the lake, the water now rippling with unseen currents. The air was thick with anticipation, the world poised on the brink of revelation. Brandon took a deep breath, the weight of countless possibilities pressing down on him. He had come to the edge, and now he had to decide whether to step forward into the unknown or retreat into the familiar. As the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the lake, Brandon felt a sense of clarity. The truth might be terrifying, but it was his to uncover. He turned to Elise, determination in his eyes. "Let's find out what lies beyond." They stepped forward together, the path ahead uncertain, but their resolve unwavering. The journey into the depths of reality had begun, and there was no turning back. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.